Ladies and gentlemen, please welcome Mark Gorenberg.
Thank you, and good evening. Welcome to the MIT Campaign for a Better World. There have been 17 stops on this Better World campaign since it started on May 7th, 2016, and May 7th is a date I'll never forget because that's also the day that I met my wife, Catherine, who happens to be here. This is the second visit for the Better World campaign in Northern California. The first time in November of 2016, we hit the mark for the highest attendance number outside of Boston, with more than 800 people that attended the gathering that was there that evening. At this week's events in Palo Alto on Tuesday and San Francisco tonight, we once again have nearly 800 joining in the campaign. So the steady momentum year over year is evidence that Northern California has become the most vibrant community of alumni and friends of MIT outside of MIT campus itself. And for that, please join me in thanking our alumni clubs. They're supporting tonight's events, the MIT Club of Northern California. By the way, Shuja, are you here? Please stand up and take a bow. And also the MIT Sloan Club of Northern California. They've played such a key role, the two clubs, in galvanizing our local MIT community. Tonight's topic, the science of teaching and learning, pretty well frames the core tenets of the campaign: education, research, entrepreneurship, and MIT's commitment to solving challenges and exploring innovative ideas across a broad range of topics in discovery science, human health, and the health of the planet, the key tenets of this campaign. I graduated from MIT more than 40 years ago, and in that time, I have seen MIT continually invent and discover and then shower the world with gifts. And you saw many of them in that phenomenal video that we were shown at the start. But gifts like the World Wide Web and social robots and holograms and the human genome. And that's just the first four gifts in this book of 101, if you can see that, that MIT has given to the world in our lifetime. So come back to campus and get a copy of this. So 70 years ago, a great visionary professor, Vannevar Bush, created a report that changed U.S. science policy. And that led to the formation of the National Science Foundation. It ushered in this whole era of scientific research. And what did MIT do? MIT reorganized. It changed from a teaching school to a teaching and research school, and that led the way for all universities in this country. And today, we have a great visionary president, Rafael Reif, who's reorganizing MIT around computing and AI. The Schwarzman College of Computing is the largest investment in computing in the history of any American academic institution. And it will help educate future MIT students to become bilingual. What does he mean by that? That they'll learn a discipline and they'll also become an expert in machine learning as well. And again, MIT is going to be leading the way for all modern day universities. So as I said, we hope you get back to campus and see this transformation firsthand yourself. But this evening, we're very honored and delighted to have another one of those great visionary leaders start us off tonight, and that's Professor Eric Grimson. So Professor Grimson epitomizes tonight's topic about teaching and learning. He has long prized teaching and taught introductory computer science classes for 25 years at MIT, and teaches two introductory classes on edX today in computer science. In 2005, he became the department head of electrical engineering and computer science. Between 2011 and 2014, he served as the chancellor for MIT. And today, he serves as the chancellor for academic advancement for MIT, which is a role that gathers faculty and student input to help set MIT priorities. And then he communicates those priorities back to all of us, as he's going to do tonight. So please join me. It's quite an honor in welcoming Professor and Chancellor Eric Grimson.
Good evening. Mark, thank you for that very kind introduction. I was looking over my shoulder to see who you were talking about because it sounded like an impressive guy. And thank you for your own dedication and service to the MIT community. I also want to recognize and thank the members of MIT's William Barton Rogers Society for their generous support of the Institute and for being here this evening. So thank you to all of you for joining us. MIT's mission, and I have to tell you sort of parenthetically, most of our faculty don't know we have a mission statement, but we do. MIT's mission, like that of any great research university, directs us to educate students and create knowledge. When MIT faculty pursue this mission, they launch disruptive new industries, like the invention of additive 3D printing by Michael Seema and Emmanuel Sachs, and like many of the examples you saw in that wonderful video. They also win global recognition, like the 2017 Nobel Prize in Physics awarded to Ray Weiss for the detection of gravity waves. And they help to shape, support, and educate the kinds of astounding students and graduates who grace this stage and fill this audience tonight. It's vital, this work that we do to educate students and advance knowledge. But MIT's mission statement goes beyond that. It demands much, much more from all of us. It demands that we use our knowledge to tackle humanity's greatest global challenges. And we embrace those challenges because we know that the people of MIT can deliver to make a better world. As you heard from Mark, in May 2016, we launched the MIT campaign for a better world to help us accomplish that mission. That campaign is focused on the core priorities that bring the very best talent in the world to MIT and then empower them to tackle humanity's great global challenges. And many of you have told us that your generosity to MIT has a simple inspiration related to that. You have seen that a gift to MIT is truly a gift to the world by the way we spread that knowledge out to tackle those great challenges. What makes this true is that to the people of MIT, humanity's urgent challenges are invitations to action. From our unwavering commitment to fundamental science, to our zest for innovation and collaboration across disciplines, MIT is turning promising theories into practical solutions. MIT is very focused on ensuring that everyone in the world can benefit from clean energy and clean water, from brilliant design and breathtaking artistic works, from nourishing food and nanotechnology, from improved healthcare and increased access to education. MIT is firmly focused on the future. And we recognize that our shared future also hinges on the responsible and ethical evolution of artificial intelligence and computing technologies to address these and many other global challenges. In this galvanizing moment, MIT aspires to be the true north of computing and AI, and that is why we announced the creation of the MIT Stephen A. Schwarzman College of Computing just last October. Through this college, we will integrate computing studies and research throughout every aspect of the Institute. We'll shape the direction of computing and AI with collaborations across all 5 schools. We will add 50 new faculty lines, and we'll design new majors that will combine computational thinking with traditional disciplines. And through these, we will create that bilingual generation, the next generation of highly trained thinkers and doers, who will offer the world both technological proficiency and the cultural, ethical, and historical consciousness to use the technology for a common good. Our objectives for this new college and our campaign for a better world are admittedly bold. They will take energy, insight, and creativity from faculty and students. They will take the dedication of participation and support of MIT's alumni and friends. And many of you here tonight have already joined us in that work, and on behalf of MIT, I thank you. Thank you. As of today, the MIT community has come together during this campaign to raise more than $4.9 billion through more than 100,000 individual gifts. That 100,000, thank you. if I have my numbers right, and I have staff here who will correct me if I don't, that 100,000 individual gifts also includes gifts from more than 50% of our living alumni. And to me, that is the best reward, that you care about what the Institute does enough to help us do it again. Thank you. At the same time, as we prepare to launch the Schwarzman College of Computing, we know that fulfilling its vision will take very significant new resources. We've already encountered incredibly strong interest in the college, not just from MIT's longtime supporters, but from many new philanthropic sources as well. And given this new landscape, we are taking, as you probably have heard, the important step of increasing the campaign target by $1 billion to set a new goal of $6 billion. Now, I'm going to go off script for a second here to see if I can get a little vote from the audience here. It was suggested to me by an alumnus yesterday that a much better campaign target would be $6.28 billion. What do you think? Should we go for 628? I'll tell Raphael we're going to do tau. This new goal reflects our characteristic optimism. We just raised the goal again. Our uncommon instinct for working across disciplines, and our unwavering belief that the talented people of MIT and the MIT community can invent a better world and a better future for everyone. To make a better world, we need to focus on both creating and applying knowledge and on educating future leaders. And tonight we're going to dive into a topic that intersects both areas: how MIT is advancing the science of teaching and learning. 3 MIT scholars will talk about their work and then participate in a Q&A with you. We'll be collecting your questions via a Poll Everywhere app, and I hope there it's going to come up. There you go. So please use your mobile devices to share your questions at that URL on the screen behind me, and we will use those as we go through the Q&A. Our speakers will be Eric Klopfer, Professor and Director of the Scheller Teacher Education Program in the MIT Education Arcade; Jenna Hong, a graduating senior in computer science and cognitive science; and Sanjay Sarma, MIT's Vice President for Open Learning, who is also the Fred Fort Flowers and Daniel Fort Flowers Professor of Mechanical Engineering. And now it is my great pleasure to get out of the way and to invite Eric Klopfer to the stage to kick off this evening's presentations. Eric.
Good evening. I'm sure that some of you have kids who are at home and you're hoping they're doing something productive and not wasting their time playing video games like Fortnite. Well, I have good news and bad news. First, the bad news. They probably are at home playing video games like Fortnite. The good news is that it may not be a complete waste of time. I'm Eric Klopfer, and I create and study video games and virtual reality experiences that are designed to promote learning better than most classrooms do today. What are video games? Many of you may think of video games as mindless shooting experiences that boys play in basements while they drink Mountain Dew and eat Doritos and play on consoles. Well, it is a little bit of that, actually. But it's so much more than that. Just this past week, over 10 million people watched a live concert in the video game Fortnite. So what does make video games special and unique? Well, I think it's the idea of hard fun. Hard fun is a term coined by my late colleague Seymour Papert, who was studying kids doing the Logo programming language. And he found that kids were having fun, not in spite of what they were doing being hard, but because it was hard. They wrestled with difficult challenges, and the fun, the engagement, came from overcoming those challenges. That relates to video games. In fact, some people have defined video games as a voluntary overcoming of unnecessary challenges. Like challenges that this kid here, happens to be my kid, is facing at a big video game conference there. If a kid plays a video game and it's too easy, they'll stop playing. If it's too hard, they'll leave. It's only if we keep them continually learning at the edge of their expertise do we keep them engaged. And you get that look that you see on my kid's face there. We call that pleasant frustration. Classes, schools need to be more like video games. They need to be about solving problems in context. They need to be about working collaboratively in teams. They need to be about hard fun. This is the work that we do in my lab. We use new technologies, often through video games, to create learning experiences that are hard fun. We use machine learning to diagnose learning difficulties. We use virtual reality to have students experience new identities and new ways of understanding complex spatial processes. But we don't do this work in an academic vacuum. Instead, we use a process of design-based research to work in context with real teachers in real schools and real places and understand the problems that they face. Problems like, how do you teach algebra, geometry, or genetics? Or how do you get kids to work collaboratively in teams? The result of such designs is what you see on the screen here. On the left is a kid has a tablet view. On the right is a virtual reality view. These two kids need to be able to work together to collaboratively diagnose and fix a genetic defect with a cell. It's only by working collaboratively can they solve this problem. While it needs to start with good design, we also need to think about implementation as well. So we implement these projects and test them in schools around the corner, like in Boston, Cambridge, and Somerville, and we test them around the world. We're just finishing a project now, a small-scale project. We're in 1,000 government schools in India. Because this is a global problem. The jobs that we have today are being displaced by technology. Technologies are changing the way we interact with each other and the world around us. But technology can be part of the solution as well. At MIT, we don't have an education school, but we also don't have an energy school or a cancer school. Instead, we see these as interdisciplinary challenges that we need to bring together diverse expertise to solve. At MIT, that's become through the Office of Open Learning, who convenes groups like my group, the Teaching Systems Lab, the MIT Integrated Learning Initiative, the Jameel World Education Lab, and the Center for Advanced Virtuality, among others. Together, we work to try to solve these problems. But this isn't the first time that MIT has risen to face a grand educational challenge. You may not know this, but when the Soviet Union launched Sputnik, the United States responded with an increased emphasis on science education. MIT, in turn, responded with the PSSC physics curriculum, what became the standard in physics education for decades to come. We face another Sputnik moment today. Our educational systems lag behind the technology. But technology can be part of the solution, and MIT can lead the way. Together, we can make a better world. And for that, I thank you.
We're here tonight because of a story. You're here as a tribute to yours, to the peers and mentors at MIT who inspired you. And I'm here to tell you how mine are helping to shape the future of our beloved institute. Thinking in stories is something that we've been doing as humans for eons. In essence, it's exactly this that makes us human. By interacting with each other in our rich social environments, we encode, store, and retrieve memories in order to better understand and communicate who we are. So if memory plays a key role in telling these stories, then forms of dementia like Alzheimer's disease takes this very link away from us. Patients of Alzheimer's lose the ability to remember. More accurately, they can still process information and store it in the brain no problem, but they have trouble accessing them and making sense of them. So in a way, they're lost in time and space because they're losing the stories of their lives. I believe that artificial intelligence can change that. My name is Jenna Hong, and I'm a graduating senior in computer science and cognitive science, and I am fascinated by the human mind. I study the science and engineering of intelligence to better understand cognitive processes like knowledge, perception, and reason. I think about the very act of thinking using deep learning and statistical modeling to better represent the way we interact with the world around us. We are born with 100 billion neurons in our brain, about as many stars as there are in the Milky Way. Over the course of our development, these neurons fire together and converge in order to form intricate, ever-changing networks of information that form the basis for how we learn conceptual patterns, and more generally, how we develop the theoretical frameworks for intelligence. And as highly evolved as AI is today, a computer simply can't do that. AI is great at simple, very specific, and domain-bound tasks like playing chess, or identifying traffic patterns, or processing natural language. Still, it's brittle and ungeneralizable, making it difficult to scale and susceptible to error. It's not yet robust, and at the same time that we introduce its cool new applications, we must regulate them and be mindful around its ethical impact. So I study this exact moment where our natural learning processes can be augmented by and represented by a computer. In my classes, I'm encouraged to draw parallels between the brain and an operating system, a neuron, and an electrical circuit. Using these tools, I conduct research at the Media Lab. In the Fluid Interfaces group, we're designing a multimodal augmented reality interface that digitalizes a memory technique called the Mind Palace, which dates back to ancient Greek philosophy. The Mind Palace leverages imagination. By visualizing a space you know very well and anchoring mental images upon particular points in the path, you can access these newly associated memories simply by rewalking the path. As it turns out, spatial navigation and episodic memory formation rely on the same regions of the brain, the hippocampus and the prefrontal cortex. And so in my research, I'm using audiovisual cues to trigger neural firing in the hippocampus in order to better consolidate memories with space and senses. It is my hope that this interface will allow people to feel empowered to overcome learning barriers and memory impairments. MIT is a hub of creativity. I am surrounded by people with big ideas and the dedicated spirit to pursue them. Not only do we share this vision, we urge others to do the same. My friends are always pushing me to dive into problems that I find meaningful, and our unique solutions create a momentum that feeds innovation. MIT as a community shines because we are excited by what we do, as well as what it means. We are capable of change because collectively we understand our passions and communicate our impact. In other words, we're a bunch of storytellers. So the next time you tell the story of your time at MIT, I hope you remember the ways in which you worked then and still do to make an inspired impact. But I hope you also remember that memory is a form of time travel, and the very ability to tell your story connects you to humans from the very beginning of time to the beyond our lifetimes. At MIT, we're working to give back the gift of memory, because engineering something as timeless as storytelling is part of how we can build a better world. Thank you.
Ladies and gentlemen, I just wanted to say that our ambition in the next few years is to fundamentally reinvent education. My name is Sanjay Sarma. I am professor of mechanical engineering, and I'm vice president for open learning at MIT. 18 years ago, MIT launched a very strange and quixotic mission, which was to fundamentally change online education. We decided, controversially, to give our entire curriculum away for free to the world, and OpenCourseWare was created. People wondered if it would change our business model. What do you need? Why do you need MIT anymore? Here we are in 2019, 250 million people have downloaded courses on quantum mechanics and linguistics and architecture and mechanical engineering. It's really reassuring that many people come to MIT to download difficult content and go through it, and it's been life-changing to many of them. 10 years later, in 2011, MIT announced its first MOOC, Massive Open Online Course. And that course garnered 155,000 students, and we decided to launch two things. One is MITx, which is our content production unit, and with Harvard, edX. MITx has reached almost 4 million unique users. Eric Grimson's course alone, or his two courses together, has reached 1 million, actually it's 1.2 million people. That's 10x MIT's living alum base. Eric likes to joke that if there's an issue with our software industry, it's his problem, it's his fault. And edX has reached 45 million enrollments and has 130 university partners. Why are we doing this? We're doing this because the world is changing very fast. Students are changing, employers are changing, employees are changing, the gig economy, and so on. And also the world is waking up. Countries like India and China, aspirations are increasing. And even in America, of course, we know from our economy that people are changing jobs quickly, and technology is changing very fast, so they need to keep up. How are we doing it? Well, this being MIT, we aren't going to do it on instinct alone, although our instincts are very good. We're going to base it, as Jenna spoke so eloquently about, on the science of learning, on cognitive neuroscience, on experimental economics, on numbers, on data. We're beginning to understand, for example, the importance of curiosity in learning. It turns out that curious people have more dopamine flowing in their brain. And the dopaminergic circuit improves learning. At the same time, we have actually proved recently that mens et manus isn't some strange thing that was made up 150 years ago. We actually do learn with our hands, because when you work with your hands, the motor cortex wakes up. The motor cortex wakes up, you learn better. Stuff sinks in a little bit better. And we're learning other things. For example, there's an area, Jenna referred to the hippocampus, called the parahippocampal cortex, which is an area around the hippocampus. And it turns out, if the parahippocampal cortex is active, our learning plummets. If you quiet it, your learning goes up. It's actually fascinating stuff. And this sort of science informs us to make decisions about learning that are clear, concise, but also based on experimental evidence that we know can translate into the field. So this is where we are. We're, of course, also doing a lot of high technology. Eric talked about games. We're working a lot on virtual reality and augmented reality. The Center for Advanced Virtuality is one example. We're working on the use of artificial intelligence in learning. We're also working on teaching artificial intelligence to kids, because if that is, in fact, the new lingua franca, then every child, every young person should speak two human languages and machine learning, perhaps. We're working on the merger of AI and VR with art. We just did a hackathon with the Met and Microsoft in New York on generating art using AI. Just fascinating stuff going on. I'll just end with this one thought, though. These are all numbers, and these are all facts, and these are all science. And it's easy for us to forget real impact. And the most moving thing, the most reassuring thing for us is the letters we get from around the world, the people's faces that we see. I was just 1 week ago on Sunday, I was in Jordan, where MIT ran a hackathon for Syrian refugees in the Al-Rafaq camp in Jordan. We brought them together, and these Syrian refugees took courses in data science, they took courses in economics, and they took courses in policy. And they were at the end of an arc where they were doing an in-person boot camp. It was all done gratis. We fundraised. And looking at these young people, recognize the great gift they were receiving, but also looking at their hunger and their talent makes it all worth it. This is not theoretical stuff. The impact is real, and we are making a better world. Thank you very much. So now we will start our Q&A. I'm going to request my two colleagues, Jenna and Eric, to come up. Thank you. I just want to remind you about the Pole EV site, as Professor Grimson explained. So please go to the Pole EV website. You can log in and put your comments there. Let's start, Jenna and Eric. The first question is, where do you see education 20 years from now? Let's start with you, Jenna, because you're right in the middle of it, getting your education.
Okay. I guess as a current student, I've seen so much online learning advance in the past few years, and I've seen it both within MIT as well as all over the world. So I think this type of communication and using web technologies to learn will continue, but I think it'll continue in a lot of different modalities. So not just on the internet, but through VR or AR. Or maybe we'll communicate with students all over the world through holograms. But I imagine that it'll be a lot more hands-on. I imagine there'll be a lot more interactive talking and exploring together. Is it working?
Did Jenna, is your mic back? Can you
Yep.
say something? Yep, okay, we're back.
All right.
Right, terrific.
Yeah, so more interactive, more communicative, and definitely more hands-on.
Eric?
So first, I want to say I think I'm also in the middle of my education, and I say that jokingly, but I also think that education is becoming something that's lifelong, which is going to
Yeah.
change. I will use some data sort of to inform my answer. Some of that data is I can look back 20 years from today, and education in most schools looks a lot like it does today, which is a bit of an issue that we face. However, I do think that we are at an inflection point now. I mentioned this sort of Sputnik moment. I do think that we're at a time where we need to change, and we will starting to see change in schools, and that's moving us from more of a sort of a factual retention-based school economy to one that's much more about dynamic skills that students are going to learn that are going to keep them continually learning throughout their lives, like all of us up here, and I think out there do as well.
But why do you think things are changing now? What happened?
What's happening is pressure from in the job market, from AI, from computers displacing jobs. It's coming from the global economy that we have now that's changing the way that we think about the work that we do and our relationships with each other. And it's forcing us to make a difference in schools, because if we continue that model that in the United States, if we continue that model, that we will lose out to machines, we'll lose out to other countries. But I also feel like it's not something where we're in a competition. It's something that where all boats can rise. I think if we face this as a global community, we really can create an educational system or educational systems which are unique to each place that address these issues.
Jenna, there's a question for you, which I'm going to wrap into that, which is, what do you plan to do when you graduate? And do you think you'll continuously come back to the well to drink and learn? What do you think?
So after graduating this spring, I'll stay at MIT for an extra year doing my Master's of Engineering in Artificial Intelligence, big surprise, where I hope to continue my research in memory and AI. And the second part of that question was, will I keep learning?
Yeah.
So I think definitely, whether it's by choice or by wherever I am in my environment, I'll probably always want to kind of dive into something where I'm a little bit educated, but also have a lot to learn from the people around me. So I hope that that fire hose will never stop.
Well, one thing that people talk about, especially with AI, is personalized learning, right? So, Eric, what do you think? Is personalized learning something that's going to happen? I mean, hopefully professors and real human beings, most professors are human beings, I think. We do the personalization. But do you think there's going to be more automated personalization?
So I do think that automation can help with personalization, and I'm a big proponent of that, and I see it happening in places. But I also think that humans are a really important part of that system, and will remain a really important part of the system for the foreseeable future. It's partly about mentorship. It's partially about understanding that data and communicating with kids. It's partially about the fact that learning is a social phenomenon. It's not something that we do by ourselves. So learning does need to be personalized, and I need to feel like I'm unique. I have some agency within that. But I also need to interact with other people, whether those be peers, as well as mentors and adults in that system as well. So I see it as an important and influential thing, but I think it's something that we need to be able to develop as part of a larger social system as well. And that speaks to the sort of diverse expertise we wind up bringing at MIT, where we have social scientists that are involved in this as well as computer scientists.
Jenna, as an AI person,
Yeah.
do you think artificial intelligence will help in personalization? Will AI systems sort of figure out where the student is and what they're not getting and sort of help them out? What do you think?
Yeah, I think AI is a great tool to help with personalization. I think personalization of learning is something that actually already happens actively at MIT, again, through the social learning aspects that happen between a professor, a mentor, and a TA with a student. I think we have the tools to machine learn like what drives a student, what makes a student curious, and then can drive that student to go forward and learn more aspects of things that can be interesting to them. So yeah.
One question that's come up is, what are the ethics of AI? And of course, that's a huge question. We don't want to address that here. But is there an ethical aspect as it relates to education? For example, if the AI system sort of writes someone off or something,
Absolutely. And it's one of the reasons why I think both humans need to be part of the system, but humans, as you said, need to learn about AI. Because you might get advice that's sort of the student told me something on the way in the classroom that morning, and so that may be affecting their behavior, their mood. I need to be able to interpret that as a teacher and understand how I might sort of then use the data that might be coming from some system to be able to understand that. Or I might have to recognize that that system might have biases, and I need to be able to think about what those biases are and how I interpret those and either discard that information or use that information. At the same time, I need to be able to think about how it can inform me and help me do a better job. So I absolutely think we need to think about the ethics, and we also need to think about the way that we professionalize the teaching profession further to be able to understand and use this data.
What do you think, Jenna?
Right. I think that's a really important point. So being able to collect all this data and then understand it and interpret it, but also having AI systems that are transparent enough to explain like why we're coming to certain insights or decisions that can be implemented in the classroom. So I think even if we do use these machine learning tools, we must understand them to like a very specific context.
Yeah, so you think that explainability, where the AI system tells a student to do something, giving some rationale for why it's asking the student to do something.
Yes.
And also, of course, the bias issue, because the AI system is going to be trained by human beings, and we are extremely flawed, some more than others.
Why are you looking at me?
So another question that's come up is, actually it's sort of a broad question, which is, what do you think is the most time-sensitive, pressing educational issue that faces modern-day society? It's a big question. Eric.
So I will come back to the issue of that we're not having students leave school with the skills that they need to be able to both exist in society and exist in the job market that we have today. And this is not a future problem. This is a 2019 or it's probably a 2015 problem. And it comes from education is a complicated system that involves many different components. It's slow to change. And we do see it changing sort of at the margins. We do see schools that are integrating project-based learning, that are getting their kids to learn transferable skills, that are working on internships and ways that they can apply their knowledge immediately as well as have lifelong learning skills, but it's still at the margins, and we need to get that to come to the center. And part of that happens, I think, through innovation, part of that happens through the science of learning, and part of that happens through networks of schools learning from each other and realizing that even though each school might be unique, they all can learn from each other about ways that they can work effectively in new ways.
Jenna?
Right.
What do you think?
I think something that MITx and all these open courseware technologies are doing really well is distributing what we know and what we teach to pretty much everyone. So I think that is a super pressing issue, so having everything be available to students everywhere. I think another thing is if we use AI to kind of learn about students and their brains, then we should also implement that, right? So if we kind of are moving towards like a future of learning, then I hope that we're not forcing brains into an already existing educational system, but rather changing our system so that the information flows better to students, or that it's more geared toward how our brains work.
I will say that in some fields we call that like sort of translational research that sort of takes it from the basic science and thinks about it. We think about that as learning engineering within this field. And it's something that's a burgeoning field that we need to think more seriously about how we develop more people like that, how we apply that in different kinds of contexts, whether it be schools or development of new technologies.
Yeah, so for learning engineer, just for the audience, it's a term that Herbert Simon, the Nobel laureate, came up with. And the basic idea is, in Disney, you have Imagineers who create an experience for the visitor to have a magical time. And the question is, can we engineer learning experiences so that students or learners walk away with, deep understanding of a topic? Another question that came up is, how can MITx better reach learners in low-income nations? And what's the biggest challenge there? And maybe I'll just take a quick stab there. I think we should also recognize that in the US, there is a very significant population today that we need to take very seriously, because I'll just editorialize and give you sort of my personal view, because I have a 16-year-old who's applying to college, who will be applying to college soon. I think we have, of course, intergenerational wealth transfer. We do. But I think there's a stunning amount of intergenerational transfer of sort of a leg up in academic achievement. And this is something we need to take cognizance of, right? So you have kids who are going to be applying soon? What do you think, Rick? And also just globally. I don't want to lose that question.
Yeah, so I agree that it's an important issue that we face globally, including in the United States, that there's inequities here in educational systems, in educational access. At least in this country, everybody can go to school, but those schools vary, and the home environment can vary as well. So I think there's two things as we think about this. So one is, what are the sort of the on-ramps that we can provide? So right now, some of those on-ramps are a little bit high. And we've set that bar high within the MITx community for a good reason. We want it to be an MIT education. But there's a question of what are some of the on-ramps to that MIT education. We don't want to sort of lower our standards, but we want to make sure that we have on-ramps that get in there. And we need to think about ways that we work, that some of the work that's happened with community colleges, for example, with MITx. There's ways that we can think about doing things like that where we're extending those systems and providing other ways for people to get into those. The other one I think is a technological hurdle. It's something that I think a lot about in my own lab, which is the fact that a lot of the world's, their primary access to the internet is on a mobile device. And so the way we learn on those mobile devices is different than the way we learn on desktop computers. And so we need to think about the ways that we engineer new kinds of learning experiences that are designed for that format. And I think there's exciting things that we're already doing at MIT that are helping us to bring us in that direction.
Jenna, what are your thoughts?
Sure. So I think that technologically we have a lot of tools to get there. Maybe it's in the way that we approach this problem. So I'm thinking a lot about exposure. So I think that no matter where you are, your environment is really important in what you're interested in and what you end up becoming curious about later. So I think that being able to expose students to what's out there, like the different fields and the different innovations that they have access to or they have the resources to grasp, but they don't know about, is really important. So we could use maybe online technologies or mobile technologies to do that. And being able to connect them to people that will guide them in that direction. So I think mentorship is also something that's really important.
So one question here is, what can go wrong when you put technology in the classroom? And maybe I'll just throw out a finding from an MIT economist, MIT PhD, who did a study, I think, at West Point last year. And he showed through a randomized control trial that laptops in the classroom don't help. Students do Facebook. So technology can go wrong. And I guess the other point is that the whole point of technology is so that the classroom becomes more hands-on, right? Jenna, I mean, what would you do as a student? What would you have preferred? The professor on the stage, the sage on the stage, or more hands-on?
I definitely go with
present company excluded, including Professor Grimson, who's fantastic.
I've gleaned so much from the people that are on stage, right? The big lecture halls, the really large name professors, but also the really small seminar-based classroom style, I would say, taps more into how I learn, being able to kind of ask questions as I think of them, being able to, engage in discussion as soon as a peer and I have these thoughts. So I think the small classroom really helps me. Another thing is being able to use a laptop not just to watch a video, but also search things that I'm interested in, right? So whether it's surfing the web or looking at the applications or the examples of the theories that I'm looking at or learning in the classroom.
Eric? Are you going to have your students play Fortnite in the classroom? When's that going to happen? Then sign me up.
Yes. I think what we do see going wrong with technology in the classroom is that we assume that technology alone will make a difference. And it doesn't. What happens when you drop technology alone into the classroom is either it's a distraction or it gets relegated to doing the same thing you were doing before. So we bring laptops into classroom and kids take notes on them, just like they did on a piece of paper before, and not in necessarily any better kind of way. And there is some research that shows they do it in worse ways.
Yeah, handwritten notes are more effective than typed notes.
Because you need, and in my opinion, that's not, so there's some research that shows that they did some comparisons. Kids who write hand notes do better than the kids who take notes on computers. Because when you type on a computer, you can type verbatim as quickly as the person says it. You don't need to process anything. So the problem there isn't the computer. The problem is that we're not teaching kids how to take notes on computers. So it's not the computer alone that makes the difference. We need to think about the way that we educate people, the teachers, to be able to use those technologies effectively in the classroom. We need to come up with good applications for those things in the classroom. So that's the thing we see again and again. We've chased technology, desktop computers, laptop computers, tablets, smartphones. The technology alone doesn't make a difference. It's got to be about the people learning how to use those technologies effectively and learning engineers figuring out ways that they can use those, make applications that bring us into new different kinds of places for learning experiences.
Great. So one question actually that's someone asks here is, what is one of your favorite stories about an MIT X student? I guess that actually, I have two favorites, so I'll use both. One was in the New York Times. This is the young Mongolian Batushik Mayanbagar, who was discovered using an MIT X course. I mean, as in he was in Mongolia. He was near Ulaanbaatar, and he took Anant Agarwal's first MIT X course. Absolutely, got 100% everything. Got admitted to MIT. Graduated a year and a half ago. I was on the stage. I ran up to try and get a selfie with him as he graduated. I wasn't fast enough. That's a beautiful story. I mean, to find diamonds out there and to give them an opportunity. Amazing guy. The other one is actually very interesting. A Midwestern farmer took also Anand's course because that was the first course, so there was a lot of exposure. And Eric's course, I think. And he started automating tractors, and he now has a business automating tractors. And it was a Wall Street Journal story, actually. Any stories, anything like that you've come across, Eric?
I mean, just from my own personal experience, so we've made a number of edX courses through my lab on educational technology, and even though those courses are now a few years old, I still have people that come up to me at conferences and say, "I know you. You were the guy from that course." And they talk to me about, my university didn't have courses in educational technology, and I was so glad to find these courses there, and there was a whole suite of courses I was able to take. So it's from university students, it's from teachers who say, I haven't been able to find, I want to grow as a professional, and I haven't had those opportunities to grow as a professional until I found these kinds of courses. And that it still happens all the time. So I think the interesting thing is that we see this now, while it started in computer science and engineering, we now see this sort of phenomenon taking place across so many different fields.
Jenna, did you use OpenCourseware while you were a student?
I did. I used it to study a lot of the General Institute requirement classes, and I still refer back to them in my more advanced classes because I forget.
Did you use them in school?
In high school?
Yeah.
I used it to learn programming, actually.
Really?
To learn Python, yeah.
Oh, interesting. So, the thing about OpenCourseware is students who use MIT X or OpenCourseware, they matriculate into MIT at a higher rate. So it's become this great goodwill for MIT, It's quite amazing. So one question, actually sort of many versions of this question, they're all about AI, is AI and schools. When will AI hit schools? And there are two sides to it, teaching AI and using AI. What do you think, Eric?
So we're already seeing some AI in schools. We talked about different ways about personalized learning. What people are trying to do now, so we have so much data in schools, so kids are using technologies in some schools. We wind up getting a lot of data from those technologies. And the solution to date has been we give teachers dashboards. So they see all their different students and they have all different numbers for all those different students. But some teachers have 150, 250 students, and they can't look at numbers for all those students every day. So we're thinking about how do we use AI to be able to digest that information and give it to teachers in useful ways, and even flag it and give it directly back to students. So we're starting to see that. And there are some schools now that are also starting to teach AI as well. There's a question of what, and MIT is very much participating in this process. Hal Abelson and Cynthia Brazil are running a course this spring on teaching AI in K-12 schools. And it's thinking about what do they need to learn? Is it about algorithms? Do they need to learn the algorithms? Do they need to understand what the data means and how to sort it? So I think there's lots of good, interesting questions about what are the really essential things we need to be teaching everybody about AI so they can use it in their lives effectively. And again, I think MIT is really doing some great work in that space.
Jenna, there's one question here that you may be able to address. I'm going to put you on the spot a little bit. It's about children with autism and special ed. How can AI play a role in special ed, do you think?
Right. So I think that definitely goes back to the personalization of learning. Having those students be able to rely on technology, I think, is a really big first step. I think a lot of studies and surveys recently have kind of shown that increase in both children and kind of like the elderly in being able to interact with systems more intuitively and more naturally. So I think for children with autism, I think these systems can gather more data and more numbers about how they are learning, maybe with respect to the rest of the classroom, or maybe just like with respect to themselves. So I think going back to like the numbers and going back to the data-driven insights, it can have a lot of different applications.
And also, there's some amazing results on dyslexia, for example. So Professor John Gabrielli, who's the head of the MIT Integrated Learning Initiative, which Eric talked about, he has shown that you can actually see dyslexia in a functional MRI about 2 or 3 years before it shows up in school. And it's caused by sort of a mapping issue in the brain. And there was another paper from the University of Padova talking about how by changing the distance between letters and distance between sentences, lines in text, for some fraction, like 35% of dyslexics, it makes a huge difference. And you've got to wonder why there isn't a button you can't hit on a Kindle or an iPad that just makes it easier to read. So there's amazing opportunities to help there as well.
And John's work, talking about the translation that goes on, fMRI is great sort of scientific finding, but now he's working on how do you actually take that finding and be able to scale it through sort of computerized diagnostics instead of bringing kids through fMRI to do that diagnosis now that he has that understanding much earlier ages. So he's working on ways of scaling that and getting that out to kids so that we can diagnose all kids at early ages before it becomes a problem.
So the idea is you don't actually, the kid doesn't have to enter an MRI machine.
Right.
By giving them some sequence of tests, you can correlate
exactly.
that and maybe use machine learning, right?
Right.
And machine learning can be used to detect other conditions as well, right, Jenna?
Yeah, and even with that diagnosis process, I think that neurological disorders are, have such a sliding scale, so that a lot of how we diagnose right now are based on behavior and based on these tests. But if we use these machine learning techniques, then maybe we can have a better understanding of how to target where the communication is going wrong. Or
got it. So one question that's come up a lot, I'm sure it's on everyone's minds, is screen time. Good, bad. You started with it's good news, bad news. We'll start with you.
So screen time is almost every time I'm on a panel it comes up. Yeah. So the first thing I say is that I certainly, as a parent and as a researcher, don't think about screen time as one thing. Yes, there are some certain about the color of the light, but beyond that, the screen time is not a thing. Screen time is many different things, and so you need to think about what are the ways that your kid is using the screens, whether that be a kid in your classroom or a kid in your house. Are they reading? Are they playing games? What kind of games are they playing? Can you play those games with them and understand what value it might have? Are they watching videos? What videos are they watching? Are those interesting things that they're learning about science? They're learning about history, or or is it my kids unfortunately just watch a lot of memes? So it's about thinking about what they're doing in that medium. And there's a lot of research on this. The most recent research shows that the outcomes of the research on screen time really depend heavily upon the very specific questions that the researchers are asking, and so it means that there's not a really very big difference that we're seeing in terms of behavioral and learning outcomes based on the amounts of screen time. And I think that the key is to think about what kids are doing on it and how you can moderate that time so that it's becoming a part of their life and not overtaking their life, and then how you create experiences on those devices that are the most meaningful.
Jenna, did you get a lot of screen time as a kid?
I did. I think, like anything, there's a balance, though. So I think at this point, it's really hard to avoid screens. Like, we're very reliant on our phones and our computers, and we'll always be checking our emails, and we'll always be looking at Google, right? But I think the most important thing is how we look at it. So whether we see it as really just a tool to access more information that we need, or as something that we just look to, when we have free time. So
my theory here is, my nephew plays video games obsessively. Pause the video game, and in order to get back, you're going to solve this math problem. Like an ad, like a YouTube ad, right? So that's sort of my brute force approach, but maybe you can sneak some learning into screen time, right, Eric?
Yeah,
A little bit more subtle, you know?
So actually, that is a design that has been tried before.
Oh, is that right? I
Yes.
thought it was patented.
Very, very close to things like that. But actually, the way we think about video games is it's not about making learning fun, but it's about showing that learning is fun. So it's not about sort of like this reward system that we think about sometimes naively about video games, but it's about sort of like creating systems where you can learn that math is fun. And ways that you can use math to sort of do fun things. And that's what we think about the ways that video games translate that to a lot of kids.
Great. Well, look, this has been a lot of fun. Thank you to everyone for coming, and thank you, Jenna. Thank you, Eric. It's been a real pleasure. Thank you. Thank you. So now we can, there's a reception outside, so please feel free to come out and join the reception. But it's really been great to see you all. Thank you.
Thank you.
Say you wanna rest.